Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City of Parma Heights. I am the mayor here, Mike Byrne. I know that you're not here to hear me speak, but I would ask you show a little bit of patience. There's a few elected officials that I'd like to introduce this evening. I'd like to start with the Parma Heights Council. Our president, Bob Sepik, is on his way. He's leaving his own fundraiser, but we do have Councilwoman Marie Gallo here. We have Councilman Bob Verdill, and we also have Councilwoman Joanne Cook. And from the city of North Olmsted, Council President Paul Barker's here. And I'd also like to announce that we've got a few mayors here. From the city of Brooklyn, Mayor Rich Balbert, and from the city of Parma, Mayor Dean DePiero. We also have from County Council District 2, Dale Miller, and from our district here in District 4, we have Chuck Germana. I'd like to welcome all of you here. I'd like to welcome all the residents we have Councilwoman Colleen Coyne Gallagher here from Brooklyn. We have Councilwoman Leslie D'Souza, I apologize, also from Parma Heights. I'm sorry. I'd like to welcome all of the residents from District 4 that took the time out this evening to come and hear our new County Executive Ed Fitzgerald speak. And with that, I'll turn the mic over to Mr. Fitzgerald. Thanks, Ed.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me here and hosting me here at the Cassidy Theater. It's good to be in Parma Heights. I am a former Parma Heights resident. I don't know if you know that, Mike. I lived on Holliston Avenue, for those of you who know where that is, briefly. What we're here to do today, this is the second in a monthly series that we're doing all across the county, and we're doing it in each county council district. There's 11 county council districts. And this is following up on something I did when I was the mayor of my city of Lakewood, where every month we would pick a different part of the city and give a presentation on what we're working on, how things are going, and then try to leave as much time as possible for any questions that you might have. So I'm going to try to be brief and give an overview about the kind of things we're working on and what's happening with how we're trying to reform county government and how that's working. And then we also have, in case I'm not able to answer some of your questions, we also have some representatives of various county departments that I think can assist you if I can't answer your question. So we have a representative here from the Sheriff's Department. We also have Rick Werner, who's here from who's my Director of Human Services. We have somebody that's here from our IT department. We also have Nicole Daly-Jones, who's here and Bob Ivory, who work on my staff for any other questions that I may not be able to answer. So let me go through and let me start. I like to start these with a little bit of an inventory. What are the assets of the county, and what are the negative trends, and what are the positive trends, and how do those measure up? Now let's start with the things, the challenges that we have, the negative things that we have to struggle with here in Cuyahoga County. First of all, as most of you know, the county overall has lost over 100,000 people in the last 10 years. Now, the city of Cleveland is down significantly. It's down to under 400,000 from a peak many years ago of over 1 million. So they've had the most dramatic population loss. But as a whole, the county has lost over 100,000. Most of those losses have come from the central cities or the inner ring suburbs. We have an unemployment rate. Actually, this number is a little bit dated because it's down from this a little bit. It's closer to more like 8.7%, but it's still high. It's still over 50,000 people. So that's, to give you an example, I mean, that's a combination of, that's more than the entire city of Lakewood, the entire population of the city of Lakewood. So it's a significant amount of people, and that doesn't count all the people that are not counted in the unemployment rate. So it doesn't count the underemployed. Our underemployed rate is closer to 20% than 10%. It also doesn't count all the people that were never employed in the first place, and so they're not counted as unemployed. So if you're out of school and you haven't gotten a job yet, you're not counted as unemployed because you haven't been on a payroll yet to be counted as unemployed. So we have a significant challenge there. Education-wise, the county is suffering. We have only a 71% rate, high school graduation rate, and only 27% of the county's adult population has a college degree. Now, not everybody has to have a college degree, but almost every study has been shown that, especially in the 21st century, if you do not have a college degree, every year of education that you lack is going to affect your net income. Foreclosure, we have a serious foreclosure problem where we've been really at the center of the nation's foreclosure crisis, and we have approximately 10,500 foreclosed homes last year, and that's already up to about 1,500 so far this year. On top of all that, we had one of the biggest corruption scandals, if not the biggest corruption scandal in the county's history, one of the biggest in the state, which took away people's confidence in their local elected officials. And we're still dealing with that. I mean, the trials aren't over yet, and the investigation isn't over with yet. So that was just kind of adding insult to injury. On top of all the problems we had, we also have had to put up with some elected officials that let us down in a very serious way. On top of all of those problems, we have really the worst state budget that we've ever had to deal with, because it's cutting more funds out of local government than any previous state budget in the state's history. And we're not asking for the state to bail us out. Really what's happening is we are bailing the state out. There are funds that we pay into that went down to Columbus that used to come back to us, and now it's a one-way trip. The money's going down there and it is not coming back here. And that's going to cost the county, for instance, in excess of $30 million before it's all said and done. So all of those are things that we're having to struggle with. But on the plus side of it, we have a lot of things that we have going for us. We have some of the best medical institutions in the country between UH and Cleveland Clinic. We still have a vibrant private sector with a lot of entrepreneurs and cutting edge businesses. We have some of the greatest higher education institutions and secondary institutions, education institutions in the country. We're lucky in terms of where we're located because geographically we're on the border of some great rivers and our Great Lake. We have some of the best nonprofits and cultural institutions between the orchestra and the museum system we have, again, of almost any place in the country. And we also have a real diversity of people and talent that have come here, either been born and raised here or come here from all over the world. So we have all the ingredients that we would need to succeed. If you took all of everything we have on the right-hand side of the screen and you just and compared it with the problems we have on the left-hand screen, and then you compared that to other major metropolitan areas, but you just took the brand names off of it, okay? So you took the name Greater Cleveland off of it. You'd say, well, this must be the area that's really growing and thriving because it has all of these assets. But unfortunately, we haven't really appreciated everything that we've had. We have been on a little bit of at least public perception-wise, we've been on a losing streak. One of the reasons for that is because if you took county government and you had to decide whether it was going to be on the left-hand side of the screen or the right-hand side of the screen, most people would say county government, unfortunately, with the problems of the last couple of years, would be counted as one of our detriments and not one of our assets. So our goal as the folks that are running the new county government is to move us from one side of the balance sheet, so to speak, to the other side of the balance sheet. So that 4 years from now, you can say, when you're adding up the positive trends and the positive assets, you'd say you would include county government in that. Now let's talk a little bit about just the basics of county government. I'm gonna go pretty quickly through these slides, but the budget is about $1.3 billion. The major sources for that are sales taxes, property taxes, intergovernmental aid, that includes state and federal support, investment earnings, charges for services, that's anytime we charge a fee, and then other miscellaneous taxes. So what did that revenue stream pay for? Well, the biggest single portion of it is for social services, and that's everything from DCFS to employment and family services, services for senior citizens. All of those various programs, the county is really the provider of those as opposed to the city. So, for instance, when I was the mayor of the city of Lakewood, we had a social services department, but it wasn't nearly the percentage of our budget that the county is. And I'm sure it's the same thing in Parma Heights or in Brooklyn. They may provide social services, but most of your social services are funded by the county. Well, what else does the county pay for? Well, if a bridge or a road is a county road, we pay for the maintenance and the upkeep and the repair of that, or at least a portion of it. Public safety is another huge dollar amount. It's about $300 million that we pay either through the court system or our sheriff's department. Our sheriff's department is actually one of our largest departments. We have over 1,000 employees that work in the sheriff's department, and they handle everything from the jail services down in downtown Cleveland to all the courtroom security, and they also do some targeted law enforcement activities, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. Okay, now here's a long list. I'm not going to go through all these, but this is just a long list of what we do. Now, we do work on economic development. We have some programs that we run in that area, but that's one of the things that the new county government was supposed to put more of an emphasis on economic development. But this is just a partial list of things that we fund and that we work on with county government. Now, let's talk about the way that it's structured. Let's talk about the way that it used to be structured, the way that it's structured now. The old form of government was you had a number of independently elected countywide officials. So you had the 3 county commissioners, and they were both the executive and the legislative branch combined. So it wasn't like a city government where you had a mayor and a council. It was combined in those county commissioners. So they would make administrative decisions, but they would also deliberate and take votes on matters that were before them. We had an independently elected auditor, recorder, treasurer, prosecutor, sheriff, and coroner. Now, all of those independently elective offices, with the exception of the prosecutor's office, have now been combined under the county executive, but there's also a county council. And so it's more of a traditional, what you would have in your city if you happen to be a resident of Parma or Parma Heights. You have a mayor and you have a council. It's the same thing now with the county. We have a county executive, and we have a council of 11 wonderful people that serve with us, and we deliberate back and forth with them. They pass the budget and they set policies, and then we execute those policies. And then we still have an independently elected prosecutor. One thing that's not included in here, but maybe it's obvious, is it didn't affect the court system either. So we have over 30 independently elected judges, whether they're in common pleas court or juvenile court or probate court or domestic relations court. And that is, they are governed separately by state law. That is not governed by by our new county charter. The county charter, by the way, as you may know, was passed in 2009, and it was a ballot initiative, so people gathered signatures, put it on the ballot. It passed in the fall of 2009, and then the new elections for that office happened in the fall of 2010, and we started, officially, we all started, both the council members and myself, we started on January 1st of this year. Now, what are the priorities that we have set in the executive branch in particular that I can speak for, but I think the council would agree with me about this? What are the priorities that we've set? There's 3 general priorities, and I'm going to give some specifics about them. The first is, when you take over for a system where people have betrayed the public trust and have let people down, you have to focus on restoring that trust in the first place. First of all, because people won't even participate in democracy if they don't believe in it, and they don't believe at least some of what their elected officials are saying. Not that they're going to give them the benefit of the doubt 100% of the time, but if they believe that the system itself is rotten to the core, they're not going to have they're not even going to want to participate in it in the first place. Secondly, if you're going to have big initiatives and big projects, you want people to believe in those projects and participate in them and support them. And you can't do that if they just don't trust you in the first place. So restoring trust and confidence and the ethical standards of the new county government was really the first job we had to get done. The second is efficiency, and there's a couple different reasons for that. One is our philosophy is that you really should treat public money the same way that you would treat your own household budget. And I know many of you have families that you're supporting or on tight budgets. I've got 4 kids, and we have to watch every single thing that we spend. And so for that reason, we wanted to make sure that county government was run the same way. But we also knew that we were going to get cuts from the state, which we did get. And so we had to make up for those cuts by trying to be as efficient as possible. And lastly, we had certain things we wanted to invest in to improve county government, and we knew those were going to cost money, so we wanted to be more efficient so that we would have the funds to do that. The last thing, and that's what I was referencing, and the last thing is what do we want to invest in as a county government? Not just the typical day-to-day services, but where do we think we can really make an impact into what the quality of life is in this county? And you need money to do that. So that's why 2 and 3 are related. So let's go to the next slide. Let's talk about what have we tried to do, first and foremost, to reestablish the trust of the people in their county government. I'd been in office for about 30 minutes when we signed our first new set of ethical rules. Then we started working with the council to have a new set of ethics legislation that the council passed. We worked with them and I signed the legislation. It is the strictest set of ethical rules for any county in the state, bar none. But we didn't, establishing a rule is not enough. You've got to make sure that it's part of a whole change in culture and how people think about their government and what they think their responsibilities are as an employee or a contractor. So there's mandatory ethics training now for every single county employee. We've never had that system-wide before. And we've already had, I want to say we have about 5,500 employees that we directly supervise. We've already had almost 2,000 go through that training, but all of them are required to go through that training and all of them will go through it before the end of the year. Every single employee, without exception, every single employee gets an evaluation. I wish I could tell you that it had always been that way, but it hadn't been. We had employees that had worked there for 20 years and had never been evaluated. We had employees that worked there for 30 years and never had a job description. So you can't have higher expectations for people until you define what you expect of them. So every single employee is going through an evaluation. Every single employee is going through a classification of exactly what their job is and what are their qualifications supposed to be for that job. And if they don't have the qualifications, they cannot serve in the position anymore. The ethics training that we're requiring of employees, we're also requiring for anybody that does business with the county. Now, all of you got to see the spectacle of all of the scandals that happened in the last couple years, unfolding since actually 2008 of the county, and a lot of them had to do with people that were doing business with the county. So you had a corrupt relationship between a government official and a corrupt contractor. So we're trying to have high expectations for those that are going to be vendors with the county as well as those that work for the county. So actually tomorrow, and I anticipate you'll probably see it on television tomorrow night if you watch the news, but you'll probably read it in the paper, either online tomorrow or the next day, we're having our first large-scale vendor ethics training. And we're doing this in conjunction, actually, with the U.S. Attorney's Office. So it's a nice partnership, and that's a partnership that would not have existed a year ago. But myself and the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Ohio are going to be jointly kicking off this process where we're telling vendors, here's what we expect you to do. And if you don't follow these rules, you are going to be banned from contracting in Cuyahoga County. But we want to make sure they hear it from us directly. And then 2 more things. One is just an independent enforcement of all these rules. We don't want to rely on law enforcement to tell us when we're making these mistakes, because if the FBI comes and knocks on your door, it's usually too late. So we want to try to have some kind of, I used to be in the FBI, so I know that. So by the time they get there, it means things have already gone too far. We want to have some kind of independent, self-policing capacity to enforce all these rules. So one of the first things that I did upon taking office was we hired an independent inspector general. She was a federal prosecutor, actually, in this U.S. Attorney's Office. And the council has now officially created her department and given her the funding that she needs and the staff that she needs to make sure that these rules are abided by. Because you can have the strictest rule in the world. It's just like you can have the strictest laws in a city, but if the police aren't out there enforcing them, people will get the message that they can get away with it. And we want to make sure that we have the ability to enforce these rules ourselves. Then the last point on restoring trust is just transparency. We've got to make sure that what happens in county government is not a secret. Everybody knows it. So there's a lot of ways we do that. One is if you go to our website, and we're going to actually update the website in a few weeks from now, but if you go to our website, you can get more information about what the county's doing, who we're contracting with, what they're getting paid, than you ever could before. And we're going to keep improving on that. because we have to just be an open book. And what I always tell my fiscal people is you have to pretend as if the county checkbook is the public's checkbook. It's not your checkbook, it's the public's checkbook. They need to be able to go there and see exactly what money's coming in, what money's going out, who's getting paid, how much they're getting paid. The other thing we have to do is we have to communicate what we're doing. So that's one of the reasons that I'm here tonight, because on a regular basis we're trying to report to the public on what we're doing. Now let's talk about efficiency. A few ways that we're doing that. One is we have this process that's called county stat. I won't go into it too much, but basically it means that every single department and every single function is analyzed and evaluated by our management team on a regular basis. And every single expenditure has to be justified. It doesn't matter whether it's a vehicle or an employee or a building that we rent, no matter what it is. And then we scrutinize that as much as possible, and we look for any possible efficiency. IT. Previously, under the old system, we had an IT system where you might have half a dozen different IT groups within the county that were all doing their own thing. And they really were wasting millions of dollars. We've already saved in excess of $1 million this year just by centralizing the purchasing and making sure that our IT functions are talking to each other and being coordinated. We're going to save a lot more before the end of the year. Fewer employees. Every single month since January, actually we really started in December because we started making some budget decisions in December, but every single month of the new government we've had fewer employees than we've had before. But it's not just having fewer employees, it's how do you get there? So there are two ways to do it. You can just say to all of your directors, I want everybody to cut 10%. I don't care how you do it, just do it. And that's what I call budgeting for dummies, because you might have one department that might be 40% overstaffed. Maybe the department shouldn't exist at all, but they'll have a budget number and they'll come back and say, here, I carried out your order, now we're 10% less. You might have another department that, believe it or not, is too small. It's overstressed, it's overworked, and it's being efficient, and it could do more, and maybe they need more resources. So we don't operate in that first way where we just set an artificial number and challenge everybody to meet it. That's not what I believe, and that's not the way I ran my city either. We're going through every single department. It's a little bit slower, okay? The process is a little bit slower. But at the end of the day, you'll get to a smaller number of employees, and you'll have done it the right way by going through and evaluating every single line item. Now, how has it worked so far? We're 200 employees smaller right now than we were at the beginning of the year. But in my opinion, and I think most people, including the council people, would back me up on this, services have not been affected. So you've gotten 200 employees smaller without services being affected. That's intelligent budgeting, in my opinion. So what is that resulted in? We're closer now to about $11 million in savings now as a result. And we've got a long way to go, but we're off to a very good start. Building consolidation. The county owns or operates or leases over 50 buildings, and we're going through a whole process where we're trying to figure out how many buildings should we own, how many should we rent, and as we get a smaller workforce, how do we consolidate them so that we save on utilities and rent and building maintenance and all kinds of things. And I think by the time that's all over, we will also again save millions of dollars. And then regionalism. We've been meeting with all of on a pretty regular basis with the county's mayors, and we're looking for ways that we can share services and save money. Sometimes that will save a city more money than it will save the county, but that's part of what our mission is. That's okay. Now, that could be everything from an absolute merger. So you might have read in the paper today or last week or saw in the news that there are 4 cities on the east side that are thinking about actually merging, and we're facilitating that conversation and helping it happen. So Orange and Pepper Pike and Moreland Hills and Woodmere are all thinking about becoming one city. So they're going to go through a process, and we're going to help them with that process. But a lot of other cities might say, you know what, we don't want to merge, but maybe we should have a common fire system, or maybe we should have the same dispatch system, or maybe we want to have the same garbage pickup system. And we're gonna help with that. We're not going to force it on anybody. If a city wants to pay the same taxes they're paying now, and they want to be divided up into 59 different cities, which is what we are now, they can do it. They can do it. We don't have the I neither have the authority nor the desire to force it on anyone. But when the cities say that they're ready to do it, we're gonna be there. We're gonna be a partner with them to try to make it happen when they think it's in their best interest. Now, what are the things that we're talking about investing in? What are the things where, as I said before, there might be certain areas where we spend more money? There's 3 areas or 4 areas really where we may be actually putting more money into the system than we did before. The first is early childhood education and intervention. And every study that's been done by any medical institution, educational institution, sociological study says that for every dollar that you can spend in a child's life before the age of 5, eventually that will pay you back many times over. If you try to change a child's life at age 13 or 14 after a decade of not being up to their level of their peers or where they should be, good luck trying to change the direction of that child's life. Now that's a worthy effort. I mean, people can change at any point in their lives. Mike Byrne, I'm still hoping is going to change. So people can change no matter what age they are. But the fact is you'll have the biggest impact per dollar. You'll get the biggest bang for your buck if you try to have a real meaningful intervention in a child's life and make sure that they have the tools and the support they need so that when they start kindergarten, they start with a 5,000 word vocabulary instead of a 500 word vocabulary. And by the way, the gap is that big. So we have kids starting kindergarten here in this county that are starting with 4,000 or 5,000 word vocabularies, and you can almost predict a straight line of what their success is going to be. And we have kids that are starting with a 400, 500, 600 word vocabulary when they're 5 years old. And you can almost just as certainly predict what their trajectory is going to be in life. So we have some county programs that have made a difference with that. Unfortunately, the state has cut a lot of those programs, and we are going to try to invest more money in them. And we've also been working with groups like the Cleveland Foundation, the Gun Foundation, some of our corporations. They've put money into it because they realize that it works. Actually, the whole country realizes this works, but we just have to find the funds to do it. Secondly, college access. The county charter that was passed in 2009 mandates that the county start taking a role in education. We're going to be working with the county council about how we're going to do that. But we are going to make a major investment in trying to make college or vocational education affordable for kids getting out of high school in Cuyahoga County. Law enforcement. I mentioned before that the county sheriff's department has about 1,000 employees, but most of those employees are focused around the services and the operations of the county jail. We're trying to alter that equation a little bit. So for the first time, the county is going to have a community policing unit. It's going to be made up of between 8 and 12 officers. It's $1 million initiative that we announced a little bit earlier this year. And those officers are going to work with local law enforcement, and they're going to rotate around the county and basically be partners with local law enforcement in a way to be very visible and try to get at some of the high-profile crimes that you might be suffering through in some of the communities here. So I expect that those officers are going to be out on the street probably before the end of the year. Is that a solution to all the crime problem? No, it's not. It isn't a replacement for local law enforcement, but it's an added tool so that we can really get communities working together on a common safety plan as opposed to 59 different police forces doing 59 different strategies to combat crime. And then economic development is going to be our area where we have the biggest change in terms of how much we fund it. We made a commitment that we're basically going to float a bond for $100 million for additional economic development projects. This is based on something the state has done called the Third Frontier, where they have floated bonds and then municipalities or private entities can apply for those funds. We're basically going to do the same thing here in Cuyahoga County. So before the end of this year, I anticipate that we'll have floated those bonds. And here's what's important about that, because the county has put a lot of money into economic development before, but it's almost always been for a specific project. So the county put hundreds of millions of dollars into Jacobs Field, the Brown Stadium, the Medical Mart. What the county hadn't done before is if there was a business that employed 25 people, but they had an opportunity to expand so that they could employ 40 people, The county didn't put a lot of money into that. Now, why is that important? Not that the medical mart is a bad project or the stadium projects were bad. It's that if you look at what really is going to put people back to work, it's going to be a small business that goes from being a small business to a medium-sized business, or a medium-sized business to a larger business. It also usually isn't going to be getting some big company from overseas or from another state to move here. Now, it doesn't mean we don't try to do that, but most of your Fortune 500 companies that are still here started here. And most of the Fortune 500 companies of the future are going to be ones that started here as small businesses. So this is the biggest investment we've ever made. Not only is it the biggest investment we've ever made in this, it's the biggest investment any county in Ohio has ever made. And we took a little bit of a risk doing that, but with all these other budgetary problems, but we decided to do it because we really felt that we needed to do something to move this county forward economically. Now, that is the end of my presentation of what we're working on. Overall, I tell you, I think things are going well. The county council and I get along great. We've been working together very cooperatively. We have our leadership team in place, and I think things are going pretty well. But we are trying to get a county system that had existed one way for 200 years, and we're trying to get it to operate in a little bit different way. So we still have some work to do, but I hope that as I come back, because I'm going to do this, we're going to do this every month, and I will be back in Parma Heights or Parma Heights area. So we'll be back next year. I'll give a different kind of presentation then. It'll be different because I'll be able to say, listen, I told you we were going to work on 10 things, and I'm going to tell you exactly, here's where we are with those 10 things. So I'm hoping it's a more effective speech, not because I'll be a better speaker, but because I'll be able to actually report to you on exactly what we're getting done. And then I hope that you'll make a decision that when you look at all of our assets and all of our challenges, you'll take county government and you'll say, you know what, our county government, we have some confidence in it, we have some trust in it, and it's helping us move the ball forward on all of those challenges that we have. Now, any questions?
Currently a resident of Brooklyn, Ohio, and the American Greetings loss was a big loss for the city, but I was really excited and thankful that you've been working to bring a tenant into the building. So I wanted to know if you could talk about the progress on the anti-poaching announcement that you made, as well as if it's been embraced, and any new developments on trying to get a new tenant for the building.
Sure. Well, I'll deal with the second part first in terms of trying to get some progress with getting someone to move in to the American Greeting site. It's not going to be something that happens overnight because they're not going to move out overnight. So they have a timeline where it's going to take several years as they start to slowly build the new facility in Westlake, and then start to move employees out. So we have some time. Let me tell you some things that we're working on. First of all, I mean, I honestly was very disappointed that they made the decision that they did. And we met very early on with Governor Kasich. This was actually this was right after the election. This was in November and early December. We met with Governor Kasich, and at that time they hadn't officially announced their position. But to me, the writing was on the wall. I felt like they were going to leave, that they were signaling that they were going to leave. And one of the things that we asked the governor to do was, because they're going to end up being the recipient of about $90 million in tax credits and benefits and subsidies from the state to make this move. And my appeal to Governor Kasich was, I had two requests. One was, I said, if a business is going to take a state subsidy, take state tax dollars, and just move from one Ohio city to another Ohio city, why don't you put some requirements that they share some of the taxes that they're going to generate from that activity with the community that they're leaving? Especially in the case of Brooklyn, where it's 20 or 25% of their tax base, why don't you mandate that if they want that state money, that's fine, but you're going to have to share some of those tax resources? And the governor is philosophically opposed to that. So the governor would not agree to that. Then I asked whether he would agree to just doing it on a temporary basis to give us maybe 5 or 7 years before Brooklyn would lose all the tax benefit, and he was not interested in that option either. My other suggestion to him was that if you're going to take state tax money and you're going to subsidize the business to move, you need to offer some kind of assistance to the community that is losing that business. So there should be some kind of at least temporary tax break for that city so that we can use that as a tool to bring in some additional business. And he has said that he is open to that idea. Now, we do have some legislation that we have drafted for the state legislature, and we have talked to some legislators about passing that. It has not passed yet. I don't know if it ever will. So what are we stuck with in the meantime? Well, really what it means is that the state is facilitating the moving of that asset out of the city of Brooklyn to the city of Westlake. Let me tell you another reason why that hurts so much, okay? The city, as I said before, it's 25%, 20 to 25% of the tax base of the city of Brooklyn. Westlake is a great city and all, but Westlake at one point had 100% of their, actually it was 200% of their annual budget they had in reserve, just sitting in the bank. Now, by the way, the municipal finance experts will usually suggest that you have about 10% in reserve. So if your budget is $35 million, you should have $3.5 million in the bank in case for a rainy day or in case there's a problem. So Westlake's general fund budget was about $35 million. At one point, they had about $75 million in the bank, which means they could stop collecting taxes for 2 years and run the government. City of Brooklyn, and it's an upper class community, it's mostly an upper class community, they really did not need more of a tax base. I mean, I'm sure they're happy to have it. They didn't need more of it. So to me, what the state did was they used state tax dollars to subsidize a move of a company that was a lifeline for a middle class community, and they helped them move to a community that didn't need it as much. And I have told everybody that will listen how much I am opposed to that. But that is the reality, so we've got to figure out a way to deal with it. Now, we've had a lot of meetings with American Greetings, and their attitude, I'm happy to say, has changed somewhat in that they're more open to what the new use is going to be of that property. They have some facilities there that they do audiovisual production work for that is really tailor-made for some of the film industry that is moving here. The film industry in Cleveland is real. I gotta be honest, I was one of the people that was skeptical about it. But there's something like between 16 and 20 movies are going to be filmed in the Cleveland area in the next 6 months. And they bring a huge payroll. I mean, there are literally thousands and thousands of hotel rooms that are going to be rented this fall because of movie productions that are being done. And they have a lot of processing needs, and there is a real chance that some of them will move some facilities into that particular location. But that isn't a panacea. Now, we have sat down with the folks from Brooklyn, my development department, and we're looking at trying to set aside some funds to try to give businesses an incentive to move in there. And hopefully we'll be able to do it. It would be nice if the state would help out. Now, your question about the anti-poaching, what we don't want is we don't want cities to be bidding against themselves and really cutting their own throat to try to scrabble over their tax bases. That's what we don't want to happen. Now, most cities don't admit to doing that, but I can tell you some of them do it. And we have drafted an agreement that I think is very fair, that we're hoping that all 59 communities will sign on to. We presented it to them a few weeks ago, and I'm asking them to seriously consider signing it by September 30th. So they're going through a deliberation process right now, and it's a pretty basic agreement. It basically just says, it doesn't say you can't give an incentive. It says that the community where the business already exists should be given a chance to have on an equal footing to participate in those discussions before a business just up and leaves. Because there are businesses that have just left basically overnight and not even given their notice. You know, one thing I can say for American Greetings, at least there was a deliberation process. I can tell you, when I was mayor of the city of Lakewood, we lost a major employer that went to Avon, no notice. They were just gone. All of a sudden they said, by the way, we're leaving, we're closing, we're leaving. And it would just make, I think, more rational economic sense if the cities would agree to cooperate. So we're at least going to try to get this one signed and then maybe there'd be a chance to do something more ambitious later, but we're hoping to get something basic signed. Any other questions? Anything on anyone's mind? Yes, ma'am.
There are a lot of boards and commissions in Cuyahoga County, and most of them I don't think you have really direct supervision of a lot of them, but you do get to appoint people to those boards and commissions. What kind of process are you going to use to make sure that these folks don't have conflicts of interest
Right.
or not skilled enough for the position?
That's a great question, and that's one of those things I can check off as something that we have done a lot of work with. The county executive and together with county council, we make dozens and dozens and dozens of appointments, and a lot of them are very important. A lot of them don't make the newspaper, but they're important nonetheless. It's everything from the Port Authority to Metro Hospital to the Adams Board. There's a whole slew of boards, and there had never been a public process before about who was appointed. So if you were going to be appointed, it was going to be, and the way the system used to work was the commissioners would make the appointment. And if you were going to be appointed, it was going to be because the commissioners had invited you to apply, or you knew about the appointment and you asked about it, and you asked to be considered. We're not doing it that way now. Every single appointment, we start from scratch. And by the way, we also don't assume because you're already on a board that you're going to be reappointed, because we've had people that have served for almost 30 years on the same board. And for those of you that have served on boards, it's hard to stay motivated about anything for 30 years, except maybe being married. So it's hard. I have my 20th anniversary this year. So, but it's hard day in and day out to have a fresh perspective after 3 decades. But that's the way the system worked. If you were on a board, you stayed on it for as long as you wanted. If you wanted to be on the board, you basically had to know the right person. So every single board appointment is now listed on the internet. And we accept applications for all of them. And we have a competitive process for all of it. And if you look at, no disrespect to the previous board appointees, but I'll give you an example of what we just did. We just made an appointment to the Metro Board. And there was a little article about it in the paper. We ended up appointing somebody that was one of the foremost healthcare experts in the United States. Now, he didn't know the right people. I'd never met him before. He wasn't politically active. He wasn't somebody that had a lot of money or made a lot of political contributions. He just really happened to be the best of the best. And the process was open enough for him to get on the board. And we're duplicating that over and over and over again. Not everybody likes that, by the way, because some people are saying, hey, I've been on this board, I deserve to be reappointed. And we're not saying they can't be reappointed, but what we're saying is you've got to put your name in the hat with everybody else, and we've got to make sure that you're qualified for this position. Secondly, there's ethical rules for the board members. You've got to fill out a financial disclosure form and say, these are any potential conflicts I might have, or that my spouse might have, because we don't want to have a duplication of some of the problems we've had in the last couple of years. So I think we're well on our way to fixing that problem. Some of the boards are resisting it, but they're all gonna get there, and they're all gonna like it. Maybe not right away, but they'll like it eventually. Yes, in the back there.
Hi.
Hi there.
You stated that there's a majority of the budget being spent on social service programs. What are the county's goals concerning the programs?
Well, it's not quite a majority. It's the largest percentage that we have. Maybe I wasn't clear about the way I expressed it. The largest percentage that we have is in social services. So it's around 600 million, roughly? 550 million. I was only off by 50 million. 550 million. That's out of a total budget of 1.3 billion. In terms of what our goals are, it's basically the same that we have for any other department. We want to make sure that it's run efficiently, that they're having an impact in what their goal is. In other words, we want to make sure that the programs that we have that are focused on poverty are moving people out of poverty and not maintaining them in poverty. We want to make sure that, it varies from department by department, but for instance, with Department of Children and Family Services, we want to put people into permanent families because we know that being a ward of the state or being shuffled from foster home to foster home is not a prescription for a healthy childhood or a productive adulthood. We've also done some things in terms on the efficiency level. We contract with a lot of private agencies. So some of those services we do directly, some of them we contract with private agencies. And we've also tried to suggest to those private agencies that there might be ways that they can be more efficient. Because the long-term trend, and by the way, a lot of those are services that are funded by state programs and by federal dollars. So some people might say, well, if you have 1.3 billion, why spend that much on social services? A lot of those are services that we're mandated to provide it, but we just happen to be the provider. But it's state and federal money. It's actually mostly state and federal money. The last point I guess I'd make with it is that, in my opinion, if you looked at that 550 million, there's a lot spent. There's not enough spent in the early stages of life, which is again why I said I'd like to make more of our budgetary priority the conditions that make up a child's life in the first 5 years of life. Not that again that you're never going to give up on any child, but the studies have shown that that's where it's probably going to be the most effective. Yes, ma'am.
You were speaking about hiring, how the hiring will be changed. I understand that former Commissioner Tim Hagan has a job at Metro Hospital. Now, are those kind of jobs advertised and open to the public and open to people to apply and see if they're qualified, or are people just given jobs?
Well, I know the situation you're referring to, and I don't believe his position was posted. The county executive's office, we control hiring in certain departments, but then there are other institutions where we have little or no role at all in terms of who gets hired and how they get hired. So Metro, for example, the county gives a contribution to Metro because the county owns Metro, but the Metro board runs Metro Hospital. They set their own priorities. Now, we can make suggestions, and we have made suggestions. And actually, I was almost late here this evening because I was at Metro talking to them about some of their management challenges. And so we do have an opportunity to make suggestions. One of the things that we're suggesting to Metro is that they look at how the county has become more transparent and open and competitive about the way we give out contracts or the way we hire people, and that they adopt some of those. And I think they will. But that decision was made in the latter part of 2010 before we'd really set the standard. Yeah, it's important, but you bring up a good point, because there are certain things that some people may associate them with the county, but we don't have direct control over it. But wouldn't it be a great thing if county government was actually a role model, and you could say, well, why can't you do things like the county? You know, people haven't said that in a while. So that would be what my goal is. My goal is for all of those other agencies that are government agencies, that not just entities in this county, but maybe across the state, say, well, why don't you do what Cuyahoga County did? They had a problem and they fixed it and they cleaned it up. So we're getting there, I think, and I think that we are starting to set a little bit of an example for some other entities, and I think you're going to see some of them adopting it, including Metro.
I'm a resident of the city.
Okay.
Officer Inspector General, I retired from that a few months ago. I've enjoyed a lot of your report, but a lot of what I see you talking to us about is what we will do tomorrow. What we have inherited because of the problems of the people who wrote the law and right now are going through the judicial process to find where they will land up after judicial judgment is made. I think we need to look down instead of up. One of the problems through my professional career that I have seen is that it's assumed that only the people in leadership, management, and executive level will tell us how and what to do. My experience is that the forefathers of everybody in here, they made what we have today. And the spirit of what exists still is present today if we remember where we came from. You mentioned just a few seconds ago about standards. You came away from a hospital. You were probably talking about standards and how to do things, etc. One of the encounters that we have had for years when we go into an organization that tries to save life and do impacting operations that do save lives is that the people who have hands on our people, our citizens, under the Constitution, they're not trained. They can't tell you what their skill is. They don't have job descriptions. They're not paid at the right level, and there's discrimination of male, female, and jobs. I would emphasize to your working process with your staff to emphasize the oversight process so that the eyeballing of what is done in the workplace is taken into all kinds of areas so judgments could be made at meetings such as this, not in boardrooms behind closed doors. One of the biggest things that has happened in present day life, we all now are exposed to smoke cessation. That started 15 years ago. It started at the county level in 15 hospitals. Those people from those 15 hospitals, they assembled together under the Office of the Inspector General, and they eventually had a lot of people quit smoking, otherwise they would die. And it's that kind of effort, I believe, that yourself in the leadership role that you have, the money you have to spend on your expertise, you should dig deeply into the people who live here because we have some wonderful ideas. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. The answer is yes. Now, I take seriously what you're saying. Let me tell you one thing where I agree with your point that, first of all, you have to make sure that your priorities in running an organization are really getting down to every worker, and that isn't all done behind closed doors. So the county stat system that I mentioned, the management system we use, we have regular meetings with basically all of the county employees, department by department, and try to solicit for their ideas and suggestions about how we could do things differently. The other thing that we've done that is different to county, that county government has not tried it before, is we have invited people that have expertise from outside of county government to loan their expertise on a volunteer basis with us. So we've had several dozen actually folks that have come in that have had experience in the private sector to help us redesign our processes to try to be more efficient. And one example is just with IT. We will save millions of taxpayer dollars before the end of this year in IT, and a lot of that is because we ask people to come in through this loaned expertise program, and they've come in and they've made suggestions that we think are going to help us save money. So you're correct that we can't. I know I don't have all the answers. I know that for sure, and we have to make sure that we're open to suggestions because there's a lot of talent that's in the community. Anything else? Are we?
First of all, I have to commend you for the efforts that you're making on behalf of city people such as us, because we can see forward that the movement's going to be the correct one. But my real question is...
Well, that was a good question. We should end with that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
We're quickly into the electronic world and the communication factor.
Right.
But there are many people who are not computer knowledgeable, are not keying in on this. Is there any thought to how you would basically communicate with these folks, such as in the job category and so on and so forth, so it's made, everybody is aware of it?
Well, your point's well taken, and we probably, that's something, and I wrote it down when you said it, because we have talked about that. There's definitely a population that is not, doesn't have computer access or isn't computer literate, and we have to make sure not everything is going to be done online in the new county system. And we're even talking about that in terms of where we put our county buildings, because I looked at a building the other day that is so enormous we could probably put every single county function there. But would it be as accessible to people that have limited transportation ability or can't do things online? So you always have to have a portion of your strategy or your budget for that audience. And that audience, every single year, the portion of people that don't use the internet goes down, right? Every single year it does. I didn't use it really. I'm 42, so I'm right in the middle. I'm not one of the younger people that always used it. I mean, you have kids now. My kids barely. They do everything on a computer. They don't write cursive. I don't know if people know that writing cursive is almost a lost art now. So there will come a time where I think almost everything is like that, and that when people think of city hall or county government, they won't even think of a building necessarily. They'll think of an app on a phone. But we are not there yet. We are not there yet. Now, I will say that the county has been too far in the other direction. We didn't do much at all when it came to what you could do online. You couldn't pay your taxes online, you couldn't look anything up online, you couldn't renew a license online, you couldn't submit building plans online. I mean, all kinds. So we have a ways to go. But your point is well taken that we can't go there 100% and leave behind people like my mother, who is not going to. We got her a computer and it collected dust, and she finally donated it to somebody. Okay, so I mean, there's some people are just not going to do it, and that's okay. We've got to make sure there's options for them too. Yes, young man.
Several months ago, you had a really great idea where you brought together 59 communities to have a think tank work session on your $100 million economic development fund. How's it going, and when do you anticipate some of the results of all those conversations?
Yeah, well, we asked them what kind of projects they thought would make sense for them, and we've collected that information. We have I guess 3 more steps to go. Well, we had 4 more steps in addition to that. One was the bond that's going to be floated is $100 million, and we had to be able to pay for the bond because it wasn't budgeted. So when I talked about the 200 employees less that we have now, the savings from that is basically going to pay for that bond. So we achieved that portion of it. So now I think we have the financial capacity to do it. So that was step number 1. Step number 2. The next thing that we needed to do, that we're in the process of doing, is I don't want those decisions on that $100 million to be made based on who somebody knows or politics. It's got to be, those decisions have to be made to benefit businesses that are going to employ the most people at a decent wage, and it can't be tainted by politics or geography or anything like that. And it's got to be completely professional. So we're putting together we're just in the first stages of this. We're going to put together an advisory panel of people from business and labor and communities to help us have the right guidelines to make sure that the strategy makes sense. Then we have to make sure that we do it transparently so everybody knows how to apply for the money and that it's a fair scoring process. Then we have to float the bonds, which, as I said, we have the money to do, and then we have to start dispersing it. Now, we're not going to disperse it until we're ready to do it. So we're not going to spend we may not float the bonds until, let's say, November. We're not going to float $100 million worth of bonds in a month because we've got to make sure that the projects are right. But here's why I know that was the right choice to make, because we've already had some private financial institutions that say, you know what, we're interested in actually contributing a few $1 million of our own if you have worthy projects. So I think it's still a work in progress. There were people who said that we should do all those things before we committed to the money, but it's kind of like a chicken and the egg. Because if I told everybody, hey, let's get together and talk about how we could spend more money when we don't have it, I think some people would be skeptical that we were really serious about it. So we're not going to float the bonds until we're ready to really pull the trigger on it, but we have already carved that out in our budget. So there's going to be this public process that goes on. It is not going to be behind closed doors. And then by the end of the year, I think you're going to start. I don't know if the first investments will be made yet. I think the fund will be set up by the end of the year, and then the jobs hopefully will start to be created in 2012. Oh, there's a young lady all the way over here.
I just have a question about county employee retirement. Is that paid by county tax dollars?
Well, they're part of part of what's a state system called the Ohio Public Employment Retirement System. And it's funded by several different sources. It's funded by employee contributions, the state picks up a portion of it, and the employer picks up a portion of it. So the county does pick up a portion of it.
All right, because there's always a point between what government people get.
Right.
Unless we have the same page, so.
Right. Well, and that's a trade-off. There are it depends where you work in the public sector, and it depends where you work in the private sector. And let me put it this way: there's a lot of talk sometimes about public employees that are paid too much. We have employees at Cuyahoga County that are in their 5th year of 0% raise. So they are not necessarily living it up. That doesn't count the unpaid time. They've all had to take a week of unpaid time. That doesn't count the fact that some of their health care benefits have changed and they're paying more for health care. So now the reason I think the county was in that mess is because I think the county had too many employees. Let me give you a quick example of my old job when I was the mayor of Lakewood. We went through 2 years of very, very tough budget times because I inherited a huge deficit that was over 10% of our general fund was in deficit. And we ended up shrinking the payroll dramatically. It was very unpopular, but it had to be done in order to get things, the ship righted. And we ended up eventually reducing over 20% of the workforce. And I asked people to take 0% raises. I changed their health care plans. I paid more for all those unpopular things the county has done. What the county hasn't done, though, is the county didn't shrink the size of the workforce significantly enough. So what's happening is, if we had gone on the same route that the county was on, every year I would have to be going to county employees and saying, you're getting another 0%, you're going to work on unpaid furlough, and the end would never be in sight. And what do you think that does to employee morale? One of the reasons we want to evaluate every single employee is we want to be able to reward employees that do a good job. If you don't show up for work and you don't work hard, you're going to be gone. But if you do show up and you work hard and you do everything we expect of an employee, we want to be able to reward you. But right now, we don't have the capacity to do that because the system is under so much stress. So what I'm trying to tell employees is, we're going to go through some sacrifices. We're going to get smaller, but then it's going to become a sustainable system where you can try to have more of a merit system and you can try to reward people for good work. And we're getting there, but there's a lot more unpopularity to come. Let me put it that way, because it's going to take us a while to get there. We didn't get there overnight. It took years to build up that many employees, years, and it's going to take, I think, about 18 months before we're there. Any other questions on anybody's mind? Yes, sir.
Mr. Executive.
Yes, sir.
This is something that you wouldn't expect. I got a situation where people land bank trying to buy some property to build on it. Find out that a 40-foot spot is listed to the Cleveland Land Bank. But yet some other operators have forfeited the fence in and they want me to buy it. They take the fence down, fight this backroom smokehouse deal that was made to get it in. Nobody is listed with the county is paying tax on it, believe it or not.
Okay.
Maybe you can sign somebody to see it.
I will.
That's been going on
The-
8 years.
The Cleveland Land, I don't run the Cleveland Land Bank, but we have some influence over it. If you give your name to Nicole, I'm gonna have somebody call you about it tomorrow. Okay, because,
Not tomorrow, because I'm getting out of
all right, next year. Whenever, at your convenience, though. But we'll get your name and contact information, and I'll see what I can do. Anything else on anyone's mind before we call it a night? Listen, I want to thank you for coming out. I appreciate it. And we have these every month. Where's the next one, Nicole? Do you know?
Yes, District 7, University Circle.
Okay. Well, when's the next one on, like, anywhere around here? Do we know? When's the next? Not that people can't go to the east side from the west side, but when's the next one?
It'll be in Councilman Miller's district.
Oh, that's right. We're going to be at West Park someplace.
Yeah.
But it's listed. You can call us, and we try to get it published in the paper. And you can go to, for those of you that use the internet, you can look it up on the internet. We do them every month. if you were fascinated by this and you can't get enough and you want to hear this again, I will be someplace next month. And again, we have some representatives up here. If there's something that you wanted to raise that that you didn't want to talk about in front of everybody, we'd be happy to talk to you. Thank you very much for your attention. Thanks for hosting me. Thank you.